Hello, I'm Sally Wiener Grotta, and this is What If, Why Not, How? Where I ask people who have interesting stories and ideas questions that are on my mind.
Today's interview is the first in a series in which I'll be chatting with people of all kinds of backgrounds about how the stories of the women of the Hebrew Bible influence us now. Joining me today is F. Deal. Now, F is a poet, an editor, a video editor, and an author of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. She began writing at the age of 9, teaching herself to type on an Underwood Royal typewriter. And I remember those things. I don't know how many people do. Her short fiction has been published in numerous online zines and print anthologies, including the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Dangerous Waters from Bridget's Gate, Chris Ryan's Soul Scream Antholozine, and she is currently assistant fiction editor at Abyss and Apex Magazine, video editor for Strong Women and for me, and a member of SIFRA, Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, and Horror Writers of America. Her novel, Esprit de Corps, from eSpec Books, is the first in a steampunk paranormal romance series set in France featuring the gifted twins of Belle Faze. Welcome, F. What is the correct pronunciation?
Belfay.
Belfay. Okay. You're a French speaker, you would have it. F, you selected Yael as the woman of the Hebrew Bible that you would like to talk about. Before we start, I'd like you to help ground our audience in who she is, perhaps with a bit of reading and a bit of context, if you could, please.
Yeah, if you read the book of Judges, every time the people of Israel sinned, God sold them out to somebody else. And in this particular setting, Ehud had died. Ehud was a good guy. And after he died, the children of Israel fell into sin. And so God sold them over to the king of the Canaanites. And so at this point, Deborah is the judge, and she calls the general of the Israelites to come and take 10,000 men up against the 900 iron chariots of Sisera, the enemy. And Barak says, well, I'll do that, but only if you come with me. So, well, you talk about empowering women, right? But she says, fine, but then the victory will be at the hands of a woman. And so this is the story of Yael, or as I learned it growing up Catholic, Jael. So I want to read from the New American Standard Bible, which is the Bible where I first read this story. So then, we can talk a little bit about layers. So this is from Judges 4. Now Sisera, this is the bad guy, fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor, which were the Canaanites, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my master, turn aside to me, do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened a leather bottle of milk and gave him a drink. Then she covered him. And he said to her, stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be, if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, is there anyone here? That you shall say, no. But Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and a hammer in her hand, and went secretly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and it went through into the ground, for he was sound asleep and exhausted. So he died.
Well, I've always been fascinated by this story because they really never says why she did it. And her husband was actually one of his allies. So it's a very strange kind of situation. It's also very gruesome. Now, first of all, I want to know, why did you select Yael? I call her Yael for our discussion today.
This story goes back to my Catholic roots. And I say Catholic roots. This is before Vatican II. And so I was part of the church very young. My dad was choir master. Everything was in Latin. And in fact, I learned a lot about language by the fact that our missals had English on one side and Latin on the other. So I could notice things about language. And I got interested in the Bible, and so I guess I was about 4 or 5, I really don't remember. But we had a big Bible in my house, the Holy Bible, of course, and I took it off the high shelf and started to read it. And my mother came in, she smacked my hands, took it away, snapped it shut, put it back up, and she said, "That is holy. You do not touch that." Wow. So, okay, I don't touch that. That's holy. That's fine with me. So many years later, 13 or 14, and I started having questions about my faith and about what's in Scripture and what it means. And this is the 60s, so it was, there was a lot of revolutionary stuff going on. So I went to my priest and I, sat down with him and I said, what about this? What about this? And he said to me, look, if you're not willing to sit down and stop asking questions, then you really shouldn't be in church. Come back when you're ready to sit down and listen. So I never really went back because I'm not one to sit down, shut up, and listen and be told what something means when I can read it for myself. So I go into the high school library and I start paging through. And what I paged through was in the back where they have an index of topics. And I came across nailed his head to the floor or something to that effect. And I said, oh, you're kidding. Now I have to say, this is the second coolest thing I found, because the other thing I found was hemorrhoids. And I thought, why would the Bible be discussing hemorrhoids? So I had to read that story first. That's another story. But I find, nail your head to the floor, and I want to see what this is. And I discover here's this woman, wife of the Kenite, and she says, come on in, and then nails his head to the floor. That's brilliant. And then I read the whole story in context with Deborah and the Canaanites and who's who on which side and whose army. And, a little before this, it mentions the fact that even though it says Heber is a Kenite, he had separated himself from the Kenites. So he wasn't even really a Kenite. He was just, a visitor, I guess, in the land. And so he had no problem with, the king of Hazor, the king of the Ken, Jabin, whatever. How would you say that? How do you say
I say it either Jabin or Jabin. It depends upon my mood. I haven't been taught that one, I don't think.
Okay.
Some of my rabbis or minister friends.
So, after getting the context and seeing that even this whole war was at the direction of a prophetess, not a prophet, who spoke for God. And I just thought, yeah, but Yael just slammed that thing down on his head and he was gone. I loved it. I just loved it.
It is what I've written about Deborah and Yael is that they actually broke the biblical glass ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time a woman is thoroughly empowered, and actually she leads and they follow.
Yes.
In fact, they ask her to lead.
And and I'm not going to go to war unless you come with me. And
Yeah.
that's the part that really got me. I
Yeah.
thought, well, you little wuss.
Well, she was blessed by God, and
Yeah, yeah.
it was like carrying the Ark of the Covenant into battle, carrying a prophet or having a prophet by your side. I'm assuming would be a blessing for the battle, and they did win the battle. But
Yes, they did.
that isn't how a woman brought the victory.
That's exactly right. I mean, you still have your general, then, the general's supposed to get killed off by his king. You
Yeah.
lose the battle, you're done. But no, 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 no. We got this. We got this chick here, and she's just so, I'm going to say, badass. And I
And
just loved it.
yeah, but I also think it brings up the ethical question. If you had the chance to kill someone who would, that if he lived, could cause the death of many, and if he dies, those deaths wouldn't happen, do you have the right and or the ethical obligation to do so? And what is the cost of doing something like that? Because here he could rally the troops again. He goes and rests in this lovely lady's tent, and then goes back and starts up the war again, and there will be
Well,
more death.
I wonder about that because it said that the 10,000 Israelites wiped out and there was not one left. Cicero was the last one of the army and he ran off on foot. So he was
Mm-hmm.
not even commanding his own horses at that point.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a running rabbit.
I'm assuming that as the general of an army, he would have reserves or whatever. I don't know. It's just, but it does bring up that kind of question: is if that, what is the right to kill? What is the obligation to kill? And when is it justified? And it's one of the things that bothers me about this story is that here's a sleeping man. Hospitality was,
Prime.
my goodness, it was one of the great um, responsibilities in life is when you offer hospitality, that person is protected. That person is covered, it is just covered with love and caregiving. And so she brings him in, gives him milk, gives him a place to sleep, and kills him.
Hmm.
And
And and there's no justification for it that's
no,
in the text, in either in the reporting in chapter 4 or in the song in chapter 5.
right.
Um, there's nothing to indicate, particularly because um, her husband was yes, was from the tribe that descended from Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe she thought that she would finish the war. If she's descended from Moses, she may have felt herself akin to the Israelites
Mm-hmm.
and therefore on their side. Um, she had means and opportunity and motive,
Mm-hmm.
although we don't see that clearly. And that's, of course, that's the problem with Old Testament script, well, all Testament scripture, um, is that history is written by the winners.
Yes.
And so, there's this woman and she did this, yeah, but she did that, but it's Deborah and Barak who claim the victory. And they sing the praises of Yael, but they're the ones who go back and say, we won.
Right.
So, and then Yael is swept away. She's just, yep, thank you, you're done.
Yeah.
Um, and well, here's the other thing that I saw in doing, as I mentioned, there are layers on this. I learned through, reading scripture and studying scripture and teaching sacred texts that what we see in English is not what was said. And so when it says, for example, turn aside, my master, turn aside to me, um, well, according to a lot of Jewish teachers, that means, oh, boys, come inside and have a taste. It's a sexual invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And in the song, it says that he fell and bowed down between her legs. And then she nailed his head to the floor. So wow, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And what's also mentioned is the fact that it's the same invitation that is issued by uh, Rahab
Yes.
to the two spies.
Yes.
Come in, my master. Come, turn aside and come into me.
That was before the Battle of Jericho. They were the spies for Joshua. Yes.
Exactly. So, 13, 14 years old, I'm reading this story. I don't see any sex. Do you see any sex? It said, she opened a leather bottle, and I think the King James says a skin of milk.
Mm-hmm.
And the song later says she brought him butter, so there was even cream in it. But the midrashes that I read said that it was breast milk, that the word milk was the word for breast milk. I'm thinking, wow, I didn't see that one either.
Well, that's the fun thing about talking about and studying what we call the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is that it is a very sketchily written narrative.
Yes.
All of them is. All the laws are sketchy too. So that we have these millennia of interpretations. And as each generation comes and each group of people within each generation comes, they put in their own interpretations, seeking themselves in the story.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about, the layers and layers and layers of interpretation that is really a sociological study of humanity, at least Western civilization, through thousands of years. If you just look at how in different environments, it's interpreted in different ways. It's why I've become so fascinated by this whole subject. And of course, the women of the Hebrew Bible have this much information in their stories. At least the men have this much, not this much. The women have this much information, so I can really go to town with it.
Well, I thought it was interesting that in the middle of discussing the battle, they just let you know that Heber the Kenite was not part of the Kenites. He separated himself. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a neat direction. I don't know what the original hearers were supposed to take from that. Was it that they were not part of the Kenites who were at war with somebody? Because it says that the king, Jabin, was friendly with Heber.
Yes, yes.
So that part of it, again, those are the kinds of things that I would like to find out. What did that mean to them? What's the context of that little footnote that, oh, by the way, he wasn't really part of the Kenite tribe anymore. Mm-hmm. So what does that make Yael? Other than the wife of Heber the Kenite.
Right, yeah, exactly. We know nothing about her background at all.
Exactly. And then I think it makes me wonder if she became his wife after he separated from the Kenites, so that she was partisan in some way. Mm-hmm. But who knows?
Yeah.
Again.
What do you think went through her mind while she killed a sleeping man?
Well, I know what went through his head. Where are they that their tent is set up? That's a big thing too, because if she sees him running and it's part of a village thing, and they've all been participating in the war, and she and her husband have not, then maybe this was her plot from the very beginning, that this guy's running away. Nah, he deserves it. She definitely had the plan in mind, because he asked for water, she gave him milk, and
Mhm.
and let him sleep and covered him over. So there's a definite seduction in that sense,
Mhm.
that she had planned this
Yeah.
from the time she invited him in.
Yeah.
We don't know why.
And she obviously
And
knew exactly who he was, too.
yeah, well, the my lord, and
Yeah.
I think it's Adoni, which is an elevated.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
commander, it's a lord and master. Yeah. And if it's said in another way, it can actually mean God, but
you got Adonai. Yeah,
but it can also be a human master.
right.
Um,
Well, and that's the funny. Can I ask you something? What is the name of the book of Judges in Hebrew?
Shaphat. So it's judge. Shaphat.
Okay, because
Shapot. I don't know what the vowels are in that.
okay,
I know there's a three-letter root that is both the noun and the participle and the verb source. That means judge or
okay,
judger or judging or
okay. I was just curious about that.
you know.
Um,
I'm just learning my biblical Hebrew, you know. I've been at it for about a year, so I'm quite a novice.
that's great.
And it's very difficult stuff. I'm using a whole nother part of my brain. I love it. But the grammar is impossible.
Well, when I'm trying to look up information about sacred texts, whether they're Arabic or Hindi or Jewish, um, they'll tell you, well, the original is, and it's this scribbly little thing, and I can't read that, which of course is exactly like a scribbly little thing someplace else.
That must be very frustrating.
It, oh my gosh! So yes, there's that.
um, I'm curious. Yael is you read her at a very formative time of your life.
Mm-hmm.
How has her story influenced you as a woman?
Well, I spent a lot of my teenage years very afraid. Um, I I was being abused, and when I mentioned it, everybody told me to just keep my mouth shut, because bringing it to the fore would make waves. And it happened a couple of times, not just sexually abused. Um, and so I read about this woman who nails a guy's head to the floor, and and then I look at the fact that they celebrate that
Mm-hmm.
they celebrate the victory, um, and at the time, morality at that point was really questionable to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew somebody was doing something wrong. I guess it was me. And that that was where I came. You got to remember, I was raised Catholic, and
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the things you learn very early on is that if you want to get to heaven, you got to suffer really hard. We would get a movie once a month in the classroom, and it was always somebody who was getting burned at the stake, or jailed and starved or nailed or whatever. And I thought, oh, okay, so that's how you get to heaven. So I took it. You take the abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and you figure that this must be what it is. But this lady, you come. Sorry, I see who you are, and I am going to take you out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, along with a number of other very courageous women who stepped out of line,
Mm-hmm.
um, and said, you may kill me for this, but I got to do this. And I think that's Yael was the first. Yael
Right.
was the first one.
Yeah. That's powerful in itself. To me, she's a reminder that women can speak out and we can pick our battles, but that we better pick them wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea of killing a man in that way has to have had quite a personal cost to her. I can't imagine living with that, with feeling, the physical feeling of doing that would stay with her for the rest of her life, I would think.
Probably, but we are also talking about a time period where military victory
Mm-hmm.
is, vaunted. It's exalted. It's one of the many things God keeps promising. You will defeat your enemies.
Right.
You will wipe them out. There will not be a single one left. Not even the goats are allowed to live, So, we are raised with a post-Western morality.
Yes.
Of right and wrong.
Yes.
And this is this is a very, very Eastern mentality, that, and again, while the Kenites were descendants of Moses' father-in-law.
Yes.
So we know that they were monotheists, but they were not the children of Israel.
Right.
So do they have the same laws? If you're dealing with that time period, the law was, according to, I'll get this right, I'll get the Hammurabi, that so that the strong do not punish the weak. That was the basis of his law, so that the strong, the powerful, do not take advantage of those who do not have power.
Right.
And then if you're looking at that as the basis, then here's a guy who is strong, who has been taking advantage of his power with his 900 iron chariots. That's good stuff, none of this leather business.
That's the nuclear weapon of the time.
Of its time, exactly. And he lost the battle, and rather than accept his defeat, he ran away.
Yeah.
So that's an incredibly shameful act. And to run away and hide out with a woman has to be like the lowest of the low for him. So, what's going through her head is that you don't deserve who you are. Right. I think.
Just to go back a little bit, could you explain to some of our audience who may not know what the laws of Hammurabi were?
The law of Hammurabi predates law of Moses, and a lot of law of Moses is included in there.
Yeah.
So there's a mishmash of stuff, but the Code of Hammurabi covers everything from how much to charge honestly for corn and wheat and goats. It dictates things like, you can't get a tattoo. It is in the Hebrew Bible, but the reason you couldn't get a tattoo in the Code of Hammurabi was that you couldn't mark a slave with your brand. And, it's kind of like cattle rustling.
Right.
So if you got a tattoo, it was for a dishonest reason.
Right.
You were hiding something. Same with pierced ears and stuff like that. And included in that is eye for an eye. But you got to understand that before it was eye for an eye, if I punched you in the eye, you took off my head, and then my family came and slaughtered your family, and then your entire city, And Hammurabi was just saying, look, enough is enough. This is justice.
It's Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi to me is a post in the growth of humanity, saying this is what civilization is. This is what a society that's made up of people who will work together and support each other. It's a beginning of that in certain areas of the world.
And it's a demand for accountability as well.
Yeah, and as you said, the laws of Moses, all the the 600 and something laws,
Yeah,
662 is it? I'm very bad at numbers, but
Numbers and Deuteronomy and,
yes,
and
they
Leviticus.
have Numbers and Deuteronomy, very good, and Leviticus too.
Yes, got to get Leviticus in there.
So, so there is a lot of common sources there
Yeah,
of humanity reaching for being better than they are,
yes,
and that's the there was like this cauldron of ideas that were percolating up in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world, but our Western civilization is rooted in the Middle East. That this came up in several civilizations, and the laws of Moses uh, were very much part of that whole experience, and rather advanced
yeah.
compared to the others, but not as advanced as what our laws are today. Now, you're a storyteller, you're a horror writer. I can just imagine someday you writing a horror story about Yael. But how are any of your characters influenced, are any of your stories influenced by what you've learned from Yael?
I have kick-ass heroines.
Yes, you
I
do.
really do. They are often alone. They're stand apart. They are outside their cultures, all of them. Um, and and they seize opportunities for victory.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, that's definitely a strong part of it.
Yeah.
You talk about a glass ceiling. I don't think I saw one.
Yeah.
And my heroines do not see glass ceilings. They go about their business. They do what they feel they need to do. Um, Whether it's legal or not doesn't enter into it. Now, with Esprit de Corps, they're in 1843 France. So yeah, the law. She chafes against the law in the same way that Georges Sand did, who was a contemporary.
Mhm.
That the law does not benefit women, although French law was far more equitable toward women than English law.
Mhm.
So they have advantages there. Women weren't afraid to speak out in 1843 France. My uh, sword and sorcery heroine, of course, there's no settled law
Mhm.
as far as that goes. She had her own beliefs and they were destroyed. So she's had to make her own as she went along.
Yeah. Great. Um, what lesson would you like women of the next generation to take from Yael, from her story?
Well, there's a couple things. As I said, the first one is to take charge of your own situation and surroundings. Take charge of what's going on around you. Um, Seize power when you can. Um, because we're talking about a powerful general. Um,
Yeah.
and he, although they were at peace, that doesn't necessarily mean that they had an equitable standing.
Mhm.
So you level the playing field a little bit. Um, and also the fact that this is so funny that she was always described as the wife of
Yes.
Heber the Kene, but he's not around in this story.
Mhm.
And so wives do have an individual accountability. And I think that's a really important lesson to come along. I'm sorry, but I just came away from the Barbie movie. And if you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend it. But the picture that they show of what is what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a woman who belongs to a man, and that's those are lessons that we are still suffering in the Christian church. where we still have churches who won't allow women pastors. Women cannot be ordained. Women can't be priests in the United States. There's thousands of years of this second classness of women, and that's throughout the Bible. But then you have these ones who just say, well, you know what? This is what I think should happen, and I'm going to do it. And that's I think, an important lesson.
Very good. Very good. Well, before we leave, I know you have publishing news. Esprit de Corps is just the first.
That's right. Yeah. The second one is going to probably be out in the late spring, early summer.
Oh, cool. I can't wait to read it. And any other publishing news that you have?
The sequel to, well, I shouldn't say sequel, the next in the collection for the Steampunk Festival is A Cry of Hounds, and I will have a werewolf story in that.
Wonderful.
I have, from Utter Speculations, there's a series, an anthology rather, that deals with the crybaby bridges across America. These are bridges, this is an urban legend, but verified, where you stand on a bridge and you can hear either a young woman crying or a baby crying, and nobody can explain it. So this is an anthology of stories that explain it. So I have a story in that is deeply rooted in my background experience. It's rituals of childhood and some bridges that you just don't cross. I've got a poem coming out in Crime and Punishment. Rhyme and Punishment. Yeah, it's a collection of comedy poetry, and mine is about the rubble from the World Trade Center that was used to fill potholes in New York, and the fact that over 1,000 bodies were never recovered from that rubble.
Yeah.
So, there's a cheerful.
You're always so prolific. I'm in awe of that. Thank you, F. It was great having you here today.
Thank you so much for asking.
Great conversation. Thank you. F. Deal's novel is Esprit de Corps, which is quite a stylish whirlwind adventure. I highly recommend it. I've enjoyed it tremendously. You can connect with her at fdeal.net. That's EFDEAL.net, on Twitter and Facebook. And you can follow her blog called Tailspinner at fdealblogspot.com. And if I may, I have some publishing news too. My new collection of feminist science fiction called Of Being Women will be released by Noble Fusion Press next week, August 15th.
Oh gosh, I didn't realize that soon. Wonderful.
Yeah, it came up fast. And Daughters of Eve is my essay-based discussion workbook that uses the story of women of the Hebrew Bible to explore who we are today. Will be published in October by Buy It Publishing, which I just had a wonderful Zoom conference with my editors. I'm very excited what they're thinking about the cover. I can't wait to see that. As always, you can connect with me at SallyWienerGrotta.com on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you, F, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sally.